Greetings, my friends. Welcome. Welcome to the show for the Saturday edition. Armor of Truth Radio number 43. And the hits keep on coming. Welcome to the stream, my friends. There we go. Today, getting into a little bit of a continuation of what we talked about yesterday on the Days of Noah stream. For those of you who may not have seen it, yesterday I was on live for about 3 hours on the Days of Noah YouTube channel with the Days of Noah. Right there. a little merch up there on the wall for you. Good quality merchandise, by the way, if you're interested in that merchandise of Days of Noah. That's good stuff. I have it. There it is. Sean Gregory, Mary Tenore are in the chat. Nate 2D2, what's happening, man? It's good to see you out there, Nate 2D2. I know you. And there's Sean Gregory, of course. All right, my friends, let's get the preliminaries out of the way because I want to get right into the presentation for you today. Anyone who might want to donate to this mission, you can find those links in the description. I always have to check and make sure they're there. I'm not using this the Restream app. By the way, streaming live in 4 locations on 4 platforms right now. We are live on DLive, live on Twitch, at Brad from Carolina, on both of those. Live on Twitter via Periscope at AOT_ministry. And, of course, live here on YouTube. I just want to check and make sure that all my links are showing up here. You never know. I have to just be sure about this. There they are. Okay, so the links are in the description. You can donate using PayPal. Simple, a preferred method. You can join the Patreon. Just one level, just a $5 level is all there is over there right now. We're going to be doing live streams, patron-only live streams. We've got one of those coming up very soon. I'll be letting you, the patrons, know about that any day now. Also, the YouTube Super Chats are available. And you can do that from your chat, right where your chat box is on whether you're using an app or your laptop. But the preferred live method of donation is the Streamlabs link, which is on your screen. It's also linked in the description, which provides a very good way to donate because 100% of the donation makes it to me without anyone taking a piece here and there. Okay, so there's that. That's out of the way. Welcome to the stream, my friends. It's good to see you all once again. I see Garland out there. There's Critical Mass. All right, let's get busy. Now, what I want to talk about today is I've written an essay. I really need a blog for this stuff. I guess I had one and got rid of it because I couldn't keep up with it. But anyway, so I've written an essay. I'm always writing these things, and yesterday. You heard some of this on the Days of Noah, on the stream I did with Days of Noah, that we're talking about this new religion that's all around us right now. It's cropping up. It's growing fast all around us. And this is a new humanist type religion. It's growing up around us. And today I'm going to read from this essay that I've put together. It's a work in progress. And then I want to share with you a little bit of what I said on the Days of Noah stream yesterday. This is all tied in together. So we're talking about this idea of the temple of man. So I want to give you a quote from Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin, who was a Russian revolutionary, politician, and political theorist. He served as the head of the government of Soviet Russia from 1917 to 1924, and then of the Soviet Union from 1922 to 1924, from 17 to 24, and of the Soviet Union from 22 to 24. Let me say that again, folks. as head of the government of Soviet Russia from 1917 to 1924, and then of the Soviet Union from the last 2 years. Vladimir Lenin is quoted as saying this. He says, quote, "Yes, we are going to destroy everything, and on the ruins we will build our temple." Now, what is the one of the main hypothesis, or one of the, I guess, the thesis of these shows that I've been doing with Days of Noah, and pretty much the way I see what's going on around us right now? We have a Marxist revolution going on in the West right now. And it's got traction. Through fear and through appealing to race and cancel culture, this Marxist revolution has a foothold right now. Now, the ideals that emerged from the French Revolution in the 1780s and 90s were indicative of the prideful uprising of man in rejection of God's will. The focus was placed on the greatness of man and man's ability to reason. In fact, reason was deified and personified in the form of a goddess, which is crowned as the new deity. So as much as they claim to hate religion, they just created a new one. All right, so the obvious contradiction here is that God is the source of both man and the laws of reason and logic. So to reject God is to reject a reasonable perception of reality and existence. Nevertheless, man is a prideful creature with a heart that loves self-exaltation. Jeremiah 17, the heart is desperately wicked. Above all, who can know it? The movement we see in Western society right now echoes the same sentiments and obvious errors in the philosophy of the French Revolution. So nothing new really happening. Just another form of what seems to occur over and over throughout history. It's just new to us because we're here and we feel like we have this free society. But it's under a threat right now. It's in jeopardy. And those who would tell you that it's not might be working for the other team. Now, David Wood put out a video a couple of days ago that makes a good point, and I would like to reiterate that point right now. As much as we talk about these issues, we talk about them from the perspective of people who are still free, people who still have liberty. And we need to be thankful for that. We need to be grateful for that. Because what David Wood was saying was, when you think you have it bad right here, you can find worse examples around the world. Christians being persecuted to death. I mean, it's bad in other areas of the world. So let's keep that perspective for sure. But let's not turn our backs on what's happening right under our own noses right here today, in our own backyard. The movement of the French Revolution, like the movement of today, sought to remove all reference to the past and to begin again with a brand new society founded on the desires of man's heart. There is another obvious problem with this approach. When one denies his history, he loses grasp of who he is and has no idea where he's going. This philosophy is intellectually and, of course, spiritually bankrupt. It's worthless. While there were some laudable results of the French Revolution, such as the push to free mankind from the rule of tyrants, the movement lacked a proper spiritual foundation that could truly benefit man at the level of his heart. In other words, the movement could only lead ultimately could only lead to more tyranny because it placed man at the apex of this new religion. This is what we see moving in our society today, once again, right now. As if the lessons of the past are being overlooked and, of course, being obfuscated. When we see the removal of icons from history, whether you agree with what those icons did or not, they did live. They were real people. And to wipe all that memory out, well, that's an errant perspective. When you forget your history, you have no idea where you're going. And if you have no idea where you're going, then it's very easy for a movement to come in and lead you where they want you to go. So if the argument is that we have been here before and should know better than to repeat the same errors, we must analyze and compare the similarities of the past movement with the one we see currently. The French Revolution sought to rid society of God. And by God, they meant specifically the Creator and Savior of Christianity. Now, Voltaire, for example, you may have seen a video I put up last night, a little piece about Voltaire. If you haven't, check it out. It's an uploaded video from last night. Voltaire was a French Enlightenment writer, historian, and philosopher, famous for his wit and, of course, his vehement hatred of Christianity. Voltaire, like many of the revolutionaries, believed in the concepts of liberty, freedom of speech, separation of church and state, and even freedom of religion, I guess to a degree. But now, while these are certainly laudable aspirations that many of us would agree with, there was nothing of substance offered in which to ground any of these lofty ideals. In other words, his ship was rudderless, could be moved around by any wave of doctrine. If morality is required for men to be free, and that morality must be objective, not left up to men to decide. Objective morality can only emanate from one pure and flawless source. We recognize that as God. So this disqualifies the heart of man right from the start. So what was known as enlightenment during the French Revolution can be seen today as social justice. The contradiction of the modern flawed sense of social justice is that some classes and ethnicities of man are to be exalted over others, or to be pitied over others. The modern form of social justice, with God nowhere to be found in the movement, seems to be leading to a repeat of the ideals that were found in segregation. In their zeal to right the wrongs of the past, they have forgotten the lessons of the past, namely, that there is no justice in exalting one class or ethnicity over others. It's an extremely immature methodology and a way of thinking. Now, they would tell you that what they're seeking is equality. But I would ask you, look at the movement. Look at the reaction. Does it look like equality? Does it look like a reasonable approach at all? During the French Revolution, churches were vandalized and destroyed. Bibles and hymn books were burned, and public mockeries were made of priests and believers. The zeal to destroy history was so strong that they even cast aside the Gregorian calendar and replaced the 7-day week with a 10-day cycle. and every month would have an even 30 days. Nature was venerated as a deity, and the extra 5 days left over at the end of the year were set aside for humanist festivals. So you see, in their desire to rid their lives of religion, they just created a new one. That's what man does. Catholicism was pushed out altogether. However, Protestantism was equally hated and marginalized. In fact, it was the Roman Catholic system that pushed the Protestant Huguenots out of France years before the Revolution. So today, we see the same zeal for pushing out Christianity and replacing it with a purely humanist, New Age sense of oneness. Science was placed on the throne as the new, infallible, sovereign source of truth. Now, the problem with this ideology is that science is useful for observation, for learning, and for creating technology, for sure. But science cannot even account for its own laws. Science has nothing to say about metaphysics. Nothing. Today, we see the same ideal being pushed in the form of Scientism. Scientism is a religious zeal for the appropriation of science as a method of control. If you don't think that's happening now, just look around. Just look around. You might hear people say things like, "We're listening to the scientists." Are you? Are you sure about that? Are the scientists telling you the truth? Are those scientists that you're listening to, are they telling you the truth? Maybe they are. Maybe they're not. The Cathedral of Notre Dame, if you will, was repurposed as a temple for liberty and reason. Christian symbols were defaced and replaced with the symbols of the religion of man, this new religion of man. Greek philosophers were enshrined as gods of reason. And the symbol of the torch became a religious idol representing truth that would burn before the altar of reason. Actresses were even hired to play the role of the goddess called Reason, who personified liberty. We have one of these today, prominently presiding over New York Harbor. Now, I'm not saying that. I'm not here to say that the Statue of Liberty is wicked and evil. That's not what anybody's saying here. I'm just making a point. Just making a point at the sins of our fathers. We seem to repeat these sins. We seem to repeat these errors and mistakes over and over and over again. In fact, there seems to be a common thread throughout history, right from the earliest recordings of history, with the same kind of movement. This same movement. If you follow William Cooper's work at all in his Mystery Babylon series, you would see this for sure. That this has been going on since the beginning. This form of liberty was highly flawed, as the guillotine became a primary method for the execution of those who represented the old order. How soon is it until we see such violent persecution here in the West? We already see violent persecution of Christians in many areas of the world right now. It's just not reported on. You just don't hear much about it. Now, another point, evolution. Evolution was revered as the creative force of nature and man. A decidedly atheistic version of the theory of evolution. The religion of the new man was born, and the temple of man was established. It was from this movement that the modern embracing of atheism, what we might call the new atheism, was born. The rejection of God was seen as the exaltation of man. Machiavelli, who wrote the political playbook, is what I call it, the political playbook called The Prince, espoused an essentially amoral way of obtaining and keeping power. Its movement was not isolated to France. Scotland's David Hume, Prussia's Immanuel Kant were also loud voices who promoted this new exaltation of reason and the rejection of God and of objective morality. Naturalism became the way of the true intellectual, because if it could not be measured in a laboratory, it was of no use to the new man. The temple of man had no place for a sovereign God who called men to submission and service in his name. Now, today, in our streets, in our governments, in our institutions of higher learning, in our corporations, in our entertainment, in our sports, and even in our elementary schools, we see this new religion being pushed so hard that it's difficult for the average product of compulsory public schooling, Common Core curriculum, to resist this illogical nature of this new religion. The temple of man is being set up once again right before our eyes, and this time even the Christian church is participating wholeheartedly via such movements as the Word of Faith movement and the prosperity gospel, which essentially preaches a masked version of the religion of the French Revolution. How so? It's human potential. The human potential movement. That's Word of Faith. Prosperity gospel. It's the human potential movement. The idea that the potential of the human being is to be worshipped and that man deserves to be exalted as of God. If you didn't know, in the prosperity gospel, in the Word of Faith movement, this new apostolic reformation, actually, one of the main teachings there is that you're a little God. They say that because you're made in the image of God, you are a God. You are a little God. This is the exaltation of man. You would have no need for God if you could make such a claim. This is the first lie that Satan told. Genesis chapter 3. Has God said? Questioning God's word, and then offering an alternate path. No, if you just go ahead and do this, you will be a God. Same thing. The same heresies, the same mistakes over and over. Okay, my friends, welcome. Let me just say welcome once again. Welcome to the stream. Let's jump over here so I can see the chat a little better. There's Block Party Vintage in the house. Nick Bowles is with us. Tara D. Chatasana Moves is with us. There's Leslie H. It's good to see you folks out there. Thanks for joining us today. So I want to share with you now a little piece that I put together that I shared on the Days of Noah stream yesterday as we were talking about. The title of the series that we've been doing is called The United States of Technocracy. And we've been looking at components of this new movement that we see cropping up around us, that we see taking hold all around us. We want to identify this stuff. We don't get bogged down and worry about it because Jesus Christ rose from the dead. And because of that, all of this stuff should not really get us down. Because this life is not all there is. And if we understand Scripture, we understand that what we see happening around us is just the way it goes. But that we have an advocate before the Father. That we have a lifeline out of this turmoil and chaos. Now, let me start off by this. I want to give you a little quote, something that Don Lemon said on CNN recently. Because the point I want to make out to you is For a Marxist revolution to happen, you have to have a society that either cannot refute it, one that is so oppressed that they cannot respond to it, or you have to have a society that has been so dumbed down that they can't argue it. They can't make an argument. So listen to what Don Lemon said on CNN, and I'm going to make a case that these revolutionaries cannot reason. Don Lemon said this. I think he was talking, it was an interview he had maybe with Terry Crews. Could have been that interview. But he said this, quote, he said, here's the thing. Jesus Christ, if you believe, if that's who you believe in, Jesus Christ admittedly was not perfect when he was here on this earth. So why are we deifying the founders of this country? So, of course, they were talking about this current movement. They were debating, should we take these statues down or not? How should we actually view the United States of America? Should we view it as evil? That seems to be the move today. Remember now, French Revolution, all the Marxist uprisings in the world as well, one of the main things they had to do was to get rid of history, to wipe out history. In communist regimes, one of the commonalities you see is that something called year zero. So when a certain regime would take over, it would essentially call it year zero. There is no past. There is no history. We're starting over right here. That's folly. You're trying to say that you're going to wipe everyone's memory? So anyway, Don Lemon, he says here that Jesus Christ admittedly was not perfect when he was here on this earth. Admitted, I don't know who he means admits that. Is he saying that Jesus Christ would admit it? But what this means is that Don Lemon doesn't know what Christianity is. He can't even make an argument against it because he doesn't even understand what it is. And he's in a position of authority. So, in the media anyway. So things like the 1619 Project, all that stuff, could never have existed back in the days when people still studied history in a meaningful way. I'm sure that most people here in school, if you're above a certain age anyway, have had to read about history. And we know something about the subject. But we just don't do that anymore in school. History has become part of a political polemic in public education, and that happened a long time ago. So if you think back, if there's anyone here who remembers the 80s, if you happen to be in school in the 80s, people started talking about this, sounding this alarm back then. If you remember, people saying, this is what William Cooper in the early 90s, when I found him on shortwave radio, this is what he was talking about. People sounding an alarm, putting out the warning, saying, hey, do you see what these textbooks are doing? These textbooks are trying to change our history. These textbooks are advocating for leftism. They're not objective. So we've seen that for many, many years. So is Don Lemon, the question I'm asking, the case I'm making here, is Don Lemon, is he just a product of this compulsory public education system? He's probably not a direct product of Common Core curriculum because that is a little newer. But no less, the compulsory public education system, the Prussian model of militaristic style education is what we're talking about. For more on that, look into John Taylor Gatto's writings. He's got a couple books, Weapons of Mass Instruction and Dumbing Us Down. Big Brother must destroy and wash our minds clean. That's what 1984, George Orwell's 1984, was all about. That's what the Stasi prisons in East Germany were all about. But we've talked about these things so many times before, but now We're watching it happen before our eyes. These people are not just in our society, they are seeking to take it over. They're seeking to fundamentally cripple our society, and it is obvious with the number of people who are being banned from YouTube, banned from Facebook, Twitter, other forms of social media. It's obvious that they have a list. They have a list, and they're working their way down the list. Small fries like myself, they don't see me, but eventually they will. Eventually they'll see all of us. Eventually they will purge YouTube of any dissenting voices whatsoever. So what we need to understand is that this totalitarian left that we see in the West today, the youngsters, anyway, they cannot debate. Their arguments are childish. Their arguments are emotional, not reasonable. And it just seems that the one who screams the loudest is the one who gets the attention. Remember back when I went to college in the mid-90s. I remember back then, people coming into class, trying to have debates, conversations with people. Today, it's gotten much worse. Today, when you try to have a debate, when you try to offer an opinion other than the one they hold, all they do is scream at you like a 2-year-old. If you happen to ask someone in the street, why do you hate Donald Trump so much? Very rarely will you actually get an answer. They might just say he's a racist. But why? Why is he a racist? Give me an argument for why you hate the man. Most of them can't do it because it's emotional. They just have an emotional reaction. They have something that's been programmed into them. So if you attempt to employ old school logic, rationality, and truth, they just plug their ears and they tune you out. And that is the product of compulsory public education, specifically Common Core or this World Core curriculum that we talked about here so much. So when we endeavor to a meaningful conversation about the foundations of justice and equality and all the good things that flow from a recognition of God's law, they can't respond with logical thought. They cannot reason at all. It's a pitiful situation. And most of the time when these folks are interviewed, when it happens, someone puts a microphone in their face, or when someone disagrees with them, all they have is a data bank of slogans. And when someone contradicts one of those slogans, all they can do is repeat the slogan. They don't have arguments, they have slogans. And these slogans are not connected to a rational thought process. They're based upon falsehoods. And they're indefensible. So you can't engage in a debate. And I would submit to you that that is by design. When I said a minute ago, for a Marxist revolution to occur, you have to have a society that is so backwards and oppressed that they don't know how, or they're too weak to respond to it. Or in the West, where it's traditionally been a strong society, in this case, you have to have a society that over years has been prepared for this, has been dumbed down to a position where they cannot respond logically. They have to shut down all dissent. No argument is allowed. No debate is allowed. They have to shut it all down. If any of you remember what Pravda is, the newspaper from the Soviet Union, that's what Pravda was all about. The word Pravda in Russian means truth. But everyone who read Pravda in the Soviet Union knew that that was that was a conflict in terms, that it did not, in fact, print truth. They printed propaganda. And we have a media in this country today, in the United States of America, that is very much like that. Our reporters, our most well-known, most famous, the ones you see on TV every day, are morons, I'm sorry to say. We've been watching this develop in our society for a long time. I remember people all along the way warning about this. William Cooper was one. People and scholars, intellectuals as well, warning about this. People from inside that system that was being corrupted, arguing, saying, look at what, and no one seemed to really listen. And for example, you can find on YouTube Yuri Bezmenov. Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB agent who was stationed in India. He defected to Canada, and he wrote something called a love letter to America, where he warned everyone that he saw what was going on right here in our own country. He defected to Canada in 1980. So this is not that long ago. And he warned everyone. And he showed point by point, this is how you degrade a society. And the first step in his list was remove God. You have to remove God. And then you can control the youth through a very specific type of indoctrination, educational system. And then in a couple generations, or just a few generations, you can take one society and turn it into something else. But what none of us could ever imagine is that it would take the form that it has taken right now and move as fast as it has. We should have been able to imagine it, because it's happened time and time again throughout history. But then again, if history is not studied objectively and understood, if history is not studied and understood even for the faults of mankind, then you're doomed to repeat these things over and over. The destruction of our cultural memory is a primary plank of the movement. So we see ideas like this idea of multiple national anthems at sporting events. But what we know from history is that once you start doing things like this, things like having multiple national anthems, trying to have two societies competing for space, once we have things like multiple national anthems, what we know from history is that nation is doomed. It's not only back to segregation, it means that the nation itself is doomed. You can't have multiple flags. You cannot have multiple flags. This is a specific attack upon that very fabric that holds this culture together. And it's ripping and shredding all around us. The result will be catastrophic. I would say, unless God intervenes somehow, the result of this will be catastrophic. There will be more violence. You can count on it. There's violence right now. And the saddest truth to come out of this recent turmoil in our streets is this. Because of this so-called Black Lives Matter movement, 97% of the people that have been killed so far in this violence are black people. So do you see the irony in all this? The lack of reason. This is the Soviet Union all over again. But this time they aim to make it stick. Once you embrace Marxism, that's all you have. There's nothing left. Because the Marxist worldview has no foundation with which to fill in the gaps where these contradictions exist. What matters to the Marxist state is the advancement of the Marxist state. And if black lives are both the symbol and the cannon fodder, then according to this establishment, according to this movement that we see, so be it. It's pure evil. Marxism is communism. Socialism is communism. It's all the same thing. And at its core, it is ultimately satanic. So that's what I think about that. Yesterday, also on the stream, we did a little something that was a little bit of fun. I had a little bit of fun looking at this the elements of a new type of religion that's cropped up around us today in the form of this humanitarianism, I guess, this idea of humanitarianism. And we went and pointed out some specific points of why are we calling this movement a religion? What are the elements of the religion? And so we had a little fun with that. But the part of it that's not fun is the idea that ultimately what all this leads to is where the citizens will ultimately be required to say Kaiser ho Kurios, or Caesar is Lord. Ultimately, what this leads to is the worship of the state as the creator, as the source of all things, the state as the God. If you look at countries like North Korea, examples of communism at work today, at its logical conclusion, there is no religion in North Korea except the one that worships what they call the dear leader, Kim Jong-un. It's been that way ever since the Kims have been in power there, since the late 40s, I guess it was, early 50s. 3 generations of totalitarian dictators. Is that where we're headed? I don't know. I don't think it's going to look like that. But I do know that in the first century, in the Roman Empire, those citizens were required to affirm Kaiser ho Kurios, that Caesar is Lord. But the Christians wouldn't do it. The Christians would not do it. The Christians were called atheists because they rejected the Roman pantheon of gods, and they would not recognize Caesar as Lord, so they were called atheists. The Christians said, Jesus ho Kurios. Jesus is Lord. So we can have a little bit of fun with this now, and let's just look at what we see going on right now, and I'll make a little case for why why it looks religious. What's going on specifically in our culture right now looks like a religion. So we can have a little fun with that. This is all subjective. This is just observation. You can take it or leave it. But so it seems like to me that the type of what Common Core curriculum is really about is it's a type of religious training. Modern Marxism, which we know today now through the Agenda for the 21st Century, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Green New Deal, the false environmentalist movement, what we know this to be now is it's called communitarianism. It is the balancing of one's rights with the community. No individual rights. Community has rights. And that is how these systems get around constitutional rights. They have people volunteer to be a part of a community. And when you volunteer to be a part of the community, you've entered into a contractual agreement. And your constitutional rights are no longer in effect. So essentially, modern Marxism is communitarianism. And it is, the way it is implemented is through a type of religious movement, obviously a false and contradictory one. So here's how it looks, in my opinion. The goal of this religion is to recreate man and society in the image of the system. Now, we see that in transhumanism as well. But that's the goal, to recreate man in the image of the system. But what is the method? The method is never-ending crisis. That's the context for all this. You have to have fear. Fear. You can build a religion if you can implant fear into people. The fear doesn't have to be based on anything real, but you can build a religion out of that. It happens all the time. There has to be a specific dogma. The dogma here is saving humanity, or egalitarianism, this idea of equality. Not that we're all born equal. That's proper and appropriate under God. But what they're saying is equality of outcome. We should all have exactly the same stuff, wealth, possessions, whatever. Which is folly, because we're all created equal, but we're not all equal in intelligence. We're not all equal in ability. And the stronger should always help the weaker. That's biblical. That's Christ-like. But that's not what they're calling for. What they're calling for is oneness. Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, Catholics, all worship together under the same roof. Because we worship the same God, don't we? No, we don't. So that's contradictory and fallacious on the start. So anyway, here's the fun part. What is the sin in this new religion? Well, the sin is what we're doing right here, questioning the narrative. Anyone who questions the narrative, like for instance questioning or saying that it's a terrible idea to obfuscate our history, that would be a sin in this new system. Questioning the science, questioning the scientism more accurately, more appropriately, or properly, questioning the science today is a sin. It's a very emotional thing to see people out here today. Some people want to wear a mask. Some people vehemently don't want to wear a mask. And it should never have become an issue of contention. But it has. Anyone who questions what has been presented as the proper way is a sinner. And so we've also got idols. The mask itself can be seen as a religious garment, type of religious garment, not unlike the Jewish yarmulke. You just take the yarmulke off the top of the head and put it over the face. Now, of course, once again, this is subjective, and we're just having a little fun with it, so don't take that too seriously, all right? The movement also has to have prophets. So we can see people like Greta Thunberg is a prophet through through her promotion of climate crisis. She promotes the idea that we are hurtling toward extinction because we're destroying the earth. They call it climate emergency. I would not disagree with the term climate change, but what could we possibly do about the climate changing? It's always changed. It changes constantly. The term they use, though, is crisis, climate crisis. Because climate emergency, they even use the term emergency is thrown around all the time today because it instills a sense of fear. And if you're gonna create a religious movement, you need fear. A religious movement has to have martyrs. We see plenty of martyrs. This movement has plenty of martyrs today. George Floyd happens to be one of these martyrs. The place where he was killed in Minneapolis has become a type of holy ground now. Did you know people are being baptized there? People are being baptized into something. It's hard to determine what it is. And George Floyd has been given this a type of sainthood even. The movement needs priests. I would point these priests out as being the technocrats, Tony Fauci, the technocrats. These are the priests of the movement. And, of course, the proselytizers. The movement needs evangelists. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is an evangelist for this movement. Nancy Pelosi. And now, of course, Joe Biden is an evangelist for this new movement, this new religion. And it is a religion of hate, my friends. No question about it. They would tell you the opposite. But just look at it. Listen to what they say. There is no tolerance at all in their movement. A religious movement needs missionaries. I would say possibly that right now, contact tracers fit the description of missionaries. Hand sanitizer is holy water. And the testing. All these testing facilities that are set up, that's kind of like an altar call, or more specifically, an initiation. And of course, the gospel and this new religion it's the human potential movement. Gospel is to tell you that God, your salvation lies within yourself. Ultimate, it's humanism at its logical conclusion, which is folly. And humanism at its logical conclusion is Kaiser Kurios. Caesar is Lord. That is humanism at its logical conclusion, which is a true exercise in blind faith. It is actually the rejection of reason and the rejection of metaphysics. In this movement, love has become compliance. The expression of love is just compliance with what you're told to do. And hate in this new movement is when you ask questions or when you honor the truth. When you honor the truth, that's considered hate in this new movement. So what do you need? I mean, just think about it for a minute. For a religion needs a creed. And this creed we see is there's no God, or it's anti-God. Pro-homosexuality, it's anti-Christianity. That's the creed. It is a belief system, for sure. You need a crisis. We've set that up. We know what the crisis is. The earth is going to end, or the crisis is, at the moment, the crisis seems to be racism and inequality. You need assemblies. We do see them gathering, for sure. You need a pulpit. Remember out in Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle, or the CHOP Zone, whatever it's called. Every day they would have a gathering, and they would let people come up and give little sermons or give ideas about what they ought to do with their newfound liberty, I guess it was. So they have a pulpit as well. A religion has to be evangelistic. We pointed that out. We know who the evangelists are. They celebrate their converts. They're zealous for their cause, and they are very exclusive. There is one way, and that way is the way they have prescribed. They have an us against them mentality. Very concerned with their public image. They have they show a lack of critical thinking skills. And they misrepresent opposing views because they cannot debate. They have a voting bloc, the progressive left. And you see infighting among them too. And money. A big man-made religion needs to be well-funded. And we see this movement has been very well-funded. Not just by individuals, but by whole corporations now. Billions of dollars being put behind this movement. So there's that. That's a little presentation put together called The Temple of Man. I put that together to present possibly in person. I've been asked to do some talks at some places, and I thought that might be a good one to do. So I put that one together for that. So welcome to the stream once again, my friends. It's good to see you out there. Streaming live to 4 platforms. I see that we've got a viewer over on Twitch right now. Thanks. Good to see you over there. The viewers over on Twitch, if you don't mind, how about clipping some of these pieces so that we can have some clips over there while you're watching. Make some clips. Clip a few of these things. So that when people show up over there, they'll see some examples of the content that we do live here. All right, let's see if I can get over here to the chat. All right, bear with me for a minute. Once again, I'm having a little issue with my Streamlabs. We'll get that fixed out in just a minute. I see Vaylor McGullis is out there with us. Chadasana Move says they're so tolerant they don't tolerate anyone who disagrees with them, with their tolerance. That's a very good point. All right, let's see. I'll get the chat going up here. I can't. It's just slow. It's just slow going for some reason. The Streamlabs, or not the Streamlabs, but the Restream software gives me trouble. All right, let's see. I'll get the chat going up here. I can't. It's just slow. It's just slow going for some reason. Okay. There we go. Now I can see you guys. All right, let's see what you guys are talking about here in the chat. All right, we're sitting right at 1 hour. We're doing pretty good today. I'm getting a little better at keeping myself under control and not going on for hours and hours. All right, here we go. Let's see. Nick Bowles says, rest in peace, William Cooper. Indeed. I see Matt Rockhill in the chat. Good to see you. There's a new name I haven't seen before. Welcome, my friends. Good to see you out there. He says, yeah, Event 201 says it all. Anyone heard of the Rockefeller document? Yes, indeed, have. They are in lockstep, for sure. It's a good point. Yeah, Rosie Clower says, yes, they don't hide their plans. People just refuse to accept that they indeed have a very evil intent. Yeah, people refuse to accept it, and also not many people can see that it's happening because they're not, there's no, it's because of the dialectic. Things have to be black or white. There's no nuance. You're not allowed to think for yourself. You're not allowed to come to your own conclusion. It must be black or it must be white. That's it. Mary Tenori makes a point here. She says, I want to study the fall of the Roman Empire. People seem to make parallels to that. Yeah, that's a good study to take up. Some will even argue that the Roman Empire is alive and well today. Just in a different form. And they would say, too, that the Roman Empire will, in fact, rise up again. I don't know. That's just that's some opinions. Vaylor McGullis says, people aren't affected by the truth anymore. They literally do not care. I see that a lot. That's sad. Block Party Vintage says, destroy America and replace it with what? Isn't that what we hear? All we hear is change, change, change. United for change. Fantastic. What change? What do you, I mean, yeah, you want to change this. You want to get rid of racism. Well, that's laudable. But what's the system you're going to replace it with? Are you going to change man's heart? Somehow change man's heart? That's folly. But that's the part that they don't see. That's the part that they cannot see. And we were talking about this yesterday in the stream with Days of Noah. I think this movement realizes ultimately the people actually in the know, the very small group of people who are in control of this. I think they realize that you can't really change the heart, because you can't know for sure whether someone's heart has been changed. Only God can know that. And I think these people realize that. Satan knows that. And Satan's got control of this world. He's the prince of this world. But God has allowed this. He hasn't taken it from God for sure. But because these people realize that they can't have access to the heart of man, they want access to the DNA instead. They want to own you by patenting somehow or another your DNA. That's just a theory, just a working theory. But there's evidence to help support it. Rosie Clower makes a comment here that makes me very happy. She says, seems like most people have forgotten the law of non-contradiction. Hypocrisy is on display everywhere. It's a great point. That deserves applause. The law of non-contradiction, my friends, is that, for instance, something called A, cannot be both A and non-A at the same time. The light switch, the light bulb cannot be on and off at the same time. That's the law of non-contradiction, essentially. And when you lose that, then you're very vulnerable. Yeah, the hive mind. We see the hive mind at work today, for sure. Leslie H. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Leslie H. has done the Streamlabs donation there. I appreciate that. No comment, just a Streamlabs donation. Thank you for that. I appreciate that very much. That is, it's very cool because the Streamlabs link, as I said earlier, the donation, 100% of the donation makes it to me, whereas the YouTube Super Chats, YouTube does take a piece of that, but I understand that the YouTube Super Chat method is it's simple and straightforward, and it's always going to be there as an option, whatever's easiest for you. Chadasana moves. I haven't heard this before, but this is good. She says it's the green new watermelon deal. Excellent. How is that? It's green on the outside and red on the inside. Meaning, environmentalist movement is the mask. If you remember a book that we reference all the time here, Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21 by Rosa Quarry. So the mask is green, but the movement is red, meaning communist, Marxist. And the term we use for that today, I would say, is communitarianism. Let me give you, just for those who might be a little new to this, some of you folks have been around for a while, have heard this over and over, but let me just give you an idea of how communitarianism is defined. Communitarianism, coming from the green mask, communitarianism is balancing your individual rights with the rights of the community. It's defined as the global community. This is being pitched to you as the new enlightened form of political discourse. And you are selfish if you insist on your individual rights and freedoms. This is the justification for UN Agenda 21 sustainable development. For the good of the planet, for everyone's security, for your health, to protect your children, right? For your health, to protect your health. We've seen that lately. To limit workplace violence. For years, we saw the mass shootings. What happened to the mass shootings? Did people just stop wanting to do mass shootings? What happened to the mass shootings? Were they organic, do you think? Who knows? To stop bullying. To protect the rights of those in the future. That's what it's sold as. We're protecting the rights of those in the future. Really? So what we have to do is familiarize ourselves with communitarianism. It is the political philosophy that's behind all of this. It states that the individual's rights are a threat to the global community. You are a threat to the global community. Everyone is an individual. That is self-evident truth. We are all individuals. So that makes us all a threat to the global community. Our rights to property ownership, to personal mobility and life choices, our rights to feed and clothe ourselves are a danger to the global community. So we must be rationed. We must be controlled. We must be watched. We must be regulated, restricted, and balanced. Our individual rights must be balanced against those unnamed rights granted to the world community by the United Nations, as codified by Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. Now, communitarianism is based on a paradigm. A problem is created, a solution is proposed, struggle between the two sides produces an outcome that is a third way. Folks, Karl Marx, Marxism, Karl Marx was a disciple of Hegel. Hegel is where is the philosopher who perfected or gave us the idea of thesis, antithesis, problem, reaction, solution, essentially. That is the way of the new system. Let me show you something here. And just because I get this all the time, people saying, that's a conspiracy theory, man. You're talking about a conspiracy theory. There's no proof for that. Boing. Well, there you go. I didn't write this book. I didn't make this book myself. This came from the United Nations. But this book exists at the United Nations website. You can search for sustainable development on the UN website, and you will. It's at un.org/ECA/SUSTDEV, SUSTDEV. You can search Agenda 21 at the UN website, and this whole document is available there. What this document does, this was printed up, this was formed in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. George H.W. Bush signed the United States onto this plan. It is something called a non-binding plan. Well, that sounds harmless, doesn't it? Non-binding. We don't have to do it then, right? No. What that actually means is the policies in this plan don't have to be voted on by Congress. They can be implemented at the level of the local government through non-governmental organizations. So it's not something that's going to be voted on. You're not going to be asked whether or not you approve of any of this. It just happens. That's the way around the Constitution. So, lest anyone claim it's just a conspiracy theory. Mary Tenore says masks are ceremonial in some cultures, for sure. And I would submit to you that a lot of what we see with the masks going on in our society today are also quite ceremonial. Tony Fauci threw out the first pitch at the Yankees game the other night. And the jersey he was wearing, can anyone guess what number was on the jersey he was wearing? Of course, it was 19. Number 19. I mean, what does that mean? What does that actually say? If I don't know. Without going down that rabbit hole right now, listen. It's very clear to us. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to recognize that what is reported about this pandemic is very deceptive. For some reason, something that is deadly to only about a tenth of a percent, less than 1% of the people who actually get it, has caused us to change the way we live our lives. That's why we argue the point that, wait a minute, we're not saying that there's no, I'm not saying that there's no virus. I don't know. There's some things I can't know. But the things I can know, the things I see, the data that we have to go on, people will even tell you today, don't look at the death toll. It's misleading. How could the death toll be misleading? Someone's either dead or they're not. You can't. That's the one stat you can't screw up. They're either dead or they're not. Anyway, I don't want to get off on all that right now. Chadasana submits that Greta is an MK Ultra victim who's being exploited. Who knows? Could be. She's what's sad about the situation with Greta is that she is a child who is on the autism spectrum, somewhere on that spectrum. I'm not sure exactly how severe or not. She's able to stand and give speeches, but the career I had before I came into this was I was a speech therapist, and I worked inside the hospitals, and I spent most of my time actually working out in communities, going to houses as a healthcare professional, doing speech therapy with children. And so many of the kids that I would do speech therapy with were children with autism. And I would talk to the families, I would talk to the parents, and they all had the same story. Everything was fine. She was learning to speak. She was saying words, and then at some point, it all stopped. And it all seems to coincide with a certain inoculation or certain series of inoculations, and then something happened. That story over and over and over and over, from house to house to house, from family to family to family, the same story over and over and over. But the thing about Greta that really is sad is I'm very familiar with children with autism, working very closely with them. It verges on abuse. I mean, it doesn't verge on it. It is abuse, in my opinion. To take this child and sort of program her. Put her up in front of these people. Because all the emotion that she's showing you, it's been programmed in. She's not of an age to actually grasp some of the concepts she's speaking of. And if she is on the autism spectrum, that's not a secret. That makes this really diabolical. They'll stop at nothing to push this agenda. Chadasana Move says she's been groomed for her role in a grand stage. I would agree. It's a sad, sad state of affairs. Amethyst 7 out there says, Amethyst, that's a clever name. I appreciate that. Amethyst 7 says, I would propose that anyone that watches television is an MK Ultra victim. That's a good point. There is a lot of programming going on that comes from that screen that sits in most living rooms. I'll read Chadasana's comment once again. They're so tolerant. Oh no, I lost it. It went away. Dang it. They're so tolerant that they don't tolerate anything. The chat jumped on me. I couldn't. That's bad. All right. Here's Miss Ostrich with a comment. Maurice Strong is one of the authors who tried to buy up water rights in Colorado. I heard he was a druid. Peter Tenaglia. There's a new name. Welcome, my friend. Has scripture from us, John 10. Very truly, I tell you, or I'm telling you the truth. I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by gate, the sheepfold by gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. Is this what they're trying by coping or DNA? It's a good question. Baylor Magola says, conspiracy, yes. Theory, no. Indeed, sir. It is not, most of this is not theory anymore. It's actually in practice. It is practically at work. Baylor Magolas gives us the statistic, a 99.5% recovery rate. Yeah. So we need to change the way we live our lives. Listen, I mean, if that's the way it is, then we should have changed the way we live our lives years ago. There's all kinds of things out there that can kill you that are far worse. But we know that this is really not about health. This is about the agenda for the 21st century. Yeah, Chada-san is talking about here, once again, that there's no such thing as a virus the way they claim. I've seen that. I've seen those presentations. I'm very careful about saying that, oh, yes, that's the truth. Because, well, it does require a certain expertise in that field to understand whether or not the virus, the way it's presented to us is really as such. So I wouldn't say that that's not the case. I'm just not sure. And the fact is, I don't need to go down that rabbit hole so far. The things that we can see, the things that we can discern are enough to know that what we're being presented is just, it's not legitimate. I heard John MacArthur the other day in a recent sermon saying the same thing in front of the congregation in California, no less. That this is a very deceptive type of movement. That reporting on it, it's deceptive. There's a deception at work. And I was happy to hear someone out there with some level who has a big following. I was happy to hear someone say that out loud. Tara D says, my little brother got Asperger's from the vaxes. Yes, I've seen, I can't tell you how many families and children that I encountered in that job. Same story, one after another. Now, this is why I took up the torch of talking about vaccine harm. Valor Margolis says, I'm a lady, Brad. My real name is Cassie. Okay, I don't know. That just, you see a screen name out there and your mind fills in all the blanks. So we know now Valor is a lady. I like that too. She says, I'm a lady. I'm a lady. So, all right, Cassie. There you are. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. I probably called you my brother, didn't I? Or something like that. Rosie Clower says, responded to Tara here, says, I watched a video of masses of people in China shaven and forced onto trains to be sent off against their will. This is happening right now. Yeah, those are the Uyghurs. Those are the Muslims in China. They're being treated to concentration camps. They call them re-education camps. They say they're being used to do labor, so they're labor camps. Yeah. And a lot of people right here in the United States of America really think that the Chinese model is a good thing. There you go. That is communism or Marxism at its logical conclusion. Listen, China loves the Leninist form of communism. It's an extreme version. Vigilant Viewer says, great channel, Brad. I just found you because of getting turned on to Days from Richie. God bless. All right. Well, thank you, my friend. It's good to have you here. I'm glad to see you. We picked up, I guess, about 50 new subscribers over the past day or two. Most of that's from being on with Days of Noah yesterday. Leslie H. says, I think more people know they have to wear the mask in order to work, but it's gradually dawning on them, I think. And there are people out there who are willing just to put the mask on to keep their job. And, we have to be compassionate about that. And the thing that Days and I were talking about yesterday, and the last comment I'll make here, because I think this is very important. As triggered as we might feel about all of this, as angry as we might get about it, it's very important to remember that a lot of people out there are genuinely scared to death. They're genuinely afraid that there is a brand new existential threat that was never here before, and that by people interacting the way they always have, somehow we could have millions of people die. There are a lot of people out there who are very afraid, and we have to be compassionate about that. We can't run up on them and start giving them all the facts and say, no, you just have to be compassionate of it. Because once again, as we've said, what we see in our nation right now is a result of decades of compulsory public education and recently Common Core curriculum, where our population has had critical training, I said critical thinking trained out of them. Common Core curriculum is all about training people to be global citizens, to not ask questions, to never question authority. And that's dangerous. So we have to realize that there's people out there who are genuinely afraid. Fear has grasped them. And even if you showed them the plain truth, they would not see it because they're blinded by fear. We have to be compassionate about that. So when we see people out, and I've seen videos of people giving people out a hard time. A guy pulled a gun on someone over a mask argument. We can't do that, man. Listen, we have to show the fruits of the Spirit. We have to demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit as a Christian. Patience, mainly patience, long-suffering. Meekness, gentleness, and respect. But that doesn't mean we don't keep pointing out contradictions and talking about the truth. It's very important, though, that we are always Christ-like about these things. Keep Steady is out. See you, brother. I guess you're a brother. I messed up on Vaylor there, but Keep Steady, I'm assuming you're a brother. So, Grace, Keep Steady's out of here. All right, so we have come to the end of another one, my folks. We're right at the hour and a half point here. Thank you, my friends, for joining me today. We'll close out with this good tune, "Houston Barbecue" by Sarah the Instrumentalist. All right, my friends. We'll see you again here tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. for our weekly walk and talk outside in nature. As long as there's not a thunderstorm, we'll be out there doing that. And I'll have a presentation ready for you tomorrow. And for all the financial supporters on Patreon and PayPal, here comes the scroll with your names on it. It's been updated. God bless you, my friends. We'll see you tomorrow.